Welcome to this rapid revision session on the Greensboro sit-in, 1960. What were the Greensboro sit-ins? On February the 1st, 1960, 4 black students in Greensboro, North Carolina went to have lunch at Woolworth's department store lunch counter. Isaiah Blair, Franklin McCain, Joseph McNeil and David Richmond were refused service at the segregated food bar. They stayed until closing time. The next day, 25 students repeated the protest, working in shifts. By February the 4th, over 300 students, black, white, male, female, were working in shifts to sit in at the bar and challenge segregation. That's right, it's gone from 4 students to 300 in a matter of a few days. Today, we'd say that it had gone viral, but this was achieved without social media or modern communication. So how did they do it? Well, the press publicised this protest when it got big enough, and then hundreds and even later thousands of people, black and white, were sitting and taking part in similar sit-in protests all across the country. Did it work? Well, one of the things that we have to understand is that there was significant discrimination against those who were doing it. In this source from the 1960s, we can see some people sitting at a lunch counter waiting to be served as part of a sit-in protest. We can see that the group that are having things poured over their heads are a mixed group of both white and black people. This was important because just by sitting together, they were showing not only that there were some white people who supported these sit-ins, but that in itself was breaking segregation rules. A racist mob stood around, probably jeering them and giving them all sorts of dreadful insults, and as you can see, tipping things over their heads. Assaults like this, and worse than this, were far from uncommon. But look closely at the people taking part in the sit-in. They are not reacting. The reason was for their own safety, and because they were determined and trained. The Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, trained students in non-violent protest tactics so that they didn't respond to provocation, like we've seen in the picture. Student groups were invited to meetings, and at one, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, usually pronounced SNCC, was set up. Here's what they did. How effective were these protests? Civil rights groups helped spread the protest rapidly. Some white Southerners joined CORE and SNCC despite threats towards them. In the end, 50,000 people took part. This was hard to ignore. Sit-ins were very visible. Unlike boycotts, they were a direct challenge to segregation rather than just refusing to use a service. Sit-ins were very visible in the media too. Coverage was mainly supportive. The protests spread into the north as well as the south, and the protests spread from being mostly black student protests to include many other people and different age groups too. The Greensboro sit-in was another example of grassroots direct action protest against segregation, another being the Montgomery bus boycott. But did it work? This is an example of youth-led protest, starting with just 4 students and spreading nationwide. The protest saw the creation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the involvement of the Congress of Racial Equality. Protesters faced a violent backlash, but their organisation, commitments and publicity succeeded in changing the policies of private businesses. That's right. Eventually, Woolworth's Lunch Diner did decide to get rid of segregation at their diner, and many other businesses did the same thing. Ultimately, a bit like the Montgomery bus boycott, their profits were being hit, but also the negative publicity was a significant hit as well. The only way of doing something about it and ending the protests, because of the determination of the protesters, was to give in. Luckily, the sit-in protesters didn't give in. They achieved this, crucially, without the Supreme Court needing to get involved. So, in very brief, that is the outline of the Greensboro sit-in and its significance, how it spread around the country. There's much more to read about this though, and it has, like I say, only been a snapshot. That said, I hope it has been helpful. If it has, give this video a like, and hopefully you'll be able to subscribe to the channel and see what other content I've got to help you with your revision. Thanks for watching for now, and goodbye.